and I got cramp in my fingers, and I can't even demonstrate it now, but they curled up and I couldn't do anything. And I couldn't, usually when you get cramp, you've got to stretch it out. I couldn't take the puppet off on stage and stretch it out. So Nicky just suddenly went into this kind of weird, and with his neck broken.
Hi guys, welcome back to Interval Conversations. I'm so glad to be joined today by a wonderful performer. He's an actor, a singer, and a professional puppeteer. So please welcome to the podcast, Mr. Chris Thatcher. Chris, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks so much for having me on.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. Now, I saw Chris. I've seen Chris live a couple of times over the years. So I think the first time was Witch the V-Swick tour you did there,
Ah,
and
mm,
Avenue Q being the main one,
mm-hmm.
because I said to him before, I was in the Trekkie zone. If you know the show, Trekkie has The Internet is for Porn song, and he usually picks on someone. That was me. But before we get into those sort of things, Chris, could you please tell us how you first got into the industry? Where did it all begin?
Well, it's a strange one because I grew up in my teen years in a place called Maidstone in Kent, and there really wasn't much around that was on an artistic scale. I had the Hazlitt Theatre, but otherwise it didn't seem to be that kind of way inclined. And I didn't know that I was going to be artistically inclined either. But I was saved by a guy called Rob Faulknell, who ran his own amateur theatre company called the Quirk Theatre Company, and it's now changed names. It's now the Changeling Theatre Company. But he was running the Quirk Theatre Company, and he did a workshop at my secondary school. And me and my good friend Liam Bowler, who I got on well with at school, we loved the drama classes, but that's as far as it went. Anyway, we did this workshop with Rob. Really enjoyed it, and he said, "Look, if you want to be part of one of our local productions, come along and audition." Which, of course, because it was amateur, it was come along and we'll give you a part,
Yeah,
no matter how small. And he did in a show called 1381 about the Peasants' Revolt, and yeah, me and Liam, my friend Liam, had very very small parts, but it kind of blossomed from there. And as time went on, Rob became a mentor to me because he knew that I had a passion for it. I just didn't have anywhere apart from his theatre group to kind of put my focus. And he told me I should go for drama school. And I didn't even know that drama schools existed. I thought drama schools were stage schools, were only for kids. And he said, no, there's adult drama schools. I didn't even know. And I auditioned for a few, got rejected by quite a few. And but I got accepted by Mount View, thankfully. And I went to Mount View and did the 3-year musical theatre course there. And upon coming out of Mount View, I managed to get myself an agent straight away, which I'm very thankful for, a woman called Hilary Gagan. And she was my first ever agent. And I managed to then go off and get my first job, which was Grease the musical. And then the career kind of blossomed from there. And I really do look back and still very much in contact with Rob, who signed the register at my wedding and is very important to my life. And I feel like without his guidance back then, I certainly wouldn't be in any of the entertainment industry, whether it be theatre or puppetry or whatever. It wouldn't have happened. So very thankful to him to be doing what I love.
yeah. So could you tell us about some of the shows you've done over the year? Because I've got your credits up here and your headshot just staring at me. So could you,
Which one? Which headshot is it?
so where you like this, like piercing that?
um yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's the headshots where I've probably put on significant weight since then, or or whether they're the kind of arty ones. But anyway, credits. Sorry, what was the question? What
Yeah.
credits? What have I done? What shows?
Yes.
I'll reel a few off, and we can talk about them. Whichever one you want to talk about. But so Greece was my first ever show. That was the UK tour, and I played Doody, and I honestly could not believe my luck because I had a solo and a duet in that show, which has recently been cut, I think, as well. Hopefully not because of me. But yes, I couldn't quite believe it, and that was the UK tour, and yeah, I had a little number in that, and just spent a year in dreamland, really. And then after that, I got my first West End job, which was Our House, the original cast of Our House, where I understudied Joe Casey, Mike Gibson, who played Joe Casey, and Olivier Award-winning Mike Gibson as well, and well deserved for that. And eventually, for particular circumstances, Mike had to have a little bit of time off just to be able to deal with the size of the role, and they gave me the alternate, so I ended up being on every Friday. And for a significant time, I was on for months as well, playing the part of Joe Casey. And it is I look back on that time as a really fantastic time of my life. After that, after Our House, I did Starlight Express. So learned how to skate, which again, just learning different skills along the way was just really enjoyable. So Starlight Express, and then I think the next kind of, I will put in there, I did a show called Two Cities based on the Russian Revolution, and on the story tale of two cities, and I loved it, but it was a big flop. And one of the reviews was the Russian Revolution. I wish I could have lined the whole cast up against the wall and shot them myself. So yeah, we'll leave that one alone. Then I did Witches of Eastwick UK tour, played Michael Spofford in that, and then after that became my kind of foray into puppetry for the first time, where I went into the West End cast of Avenue Q, covering all the male roles. And then once I'd done a year in that, I got called back in, I think, for a few weeks ago when some people went ill. And then eventually I was lucky enough to be offered the role of Trekkie Monster and Nikki in Avenue Q UK tour. And I did that for 6 months. So I did Avenue Q twice there, and then it came back again, the tour, and they offered it to me again, and I said yes again, because I literally could not pull myself away from the puppets. I love them. So I did it for a third time. And so then after Avenue Q, I decided that I wanted to carry on with puppetry, because my puppetry skills have got to a certain level, and I'm not blowing my own trumpet as opposed to in talking about talent as such. I'm a strong believer in working hard and practicing to get to a level. And because I was lucky enough to have the experience of working for a year in the West End doing it, then a bit of a break, and then 6 months, and then a bit of a break, and then another 6 months. That by the end of that particular cast, my puppetry levels were clearly above some of the other members who had just joined. And that's, again, it's just simply because of the experience. You just keep doing it every day. And I decided, not only did I have a passion for it, but I knew that my skills were at a certain level where I thought I want to try and carry on. So I spoke to the guy who taught me the basics, who worked with Jim Henson himself, which is Nigel Plaskett, and I owe him a lot. And I said, I want to do more puppeteering. I want to work on screen. And he said, well, it's very different. The style of puppeteering is very different from Avenue Q to screen puppeteering, and you're going to have to teach yourself the different methods, which we can possibly talk about that later. So I decided to teach myself my own screen methods, and I would take the videos back to him, and he would note them, and he knew that I was quite serious about it. And so a few years later, I got an email from him asking if I was available for the new Muppets film, and yeah, my jaw hit the ground, because that's not an email you get every day. And and he said, are you available? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, I haven't given you the dates yet. I mean, I'm available, it's the Muppets. And so when the Muppets Most Wanted film came around, I ended up puppeteering on that. And then I've kind of still kept in contact with the Jim Henson company in that respect. Sometimes they'll call me in for things, to audition, and the latest one was The Dark Crystal, Age of Resistance, which is on Netflix, 12-part series, and which is a prequel to the original film from the 70s. And that that was a long answer to your question, but that's pretty much the main credits that I feel blessed to have done over my career.
Because it's such an incredible repertoire of credits to your name, really. Like the
Mm.
Muppets, it's like anyone who says, "Do you want to work with the Muppets?" Yes, absolutely.
I mean, yeah. Well, it's the same with Star Wars, because I know lots of people who worked on the Muppets and Dark Crystal, and of course worked on Star Wars, but I haven't. That's not a project, or any of the Star Wars projects. I haven't worked on those yet, and I think that even so, even as much as so with Star Wars, you go ask anyone, do you want to work on Star Wars, and whatever it may be, whether it be the Mandalorian or Rogue One or whatever, they're going to say yes. So it's very difficult, but maybe one day, eh?
So, what we'll do, we'll just have a little nitpick of some of your credits. So you mentioned Our House as well, a fantastic
Yeah,
show, very tiring show as well.
yeah.
Well, what was it like? 'Cause you mentioned having to cover the wonderful Michael Gibson. What was it like playing
Mm.
that kind of role in London?
Um, well, I will say first, what was it like? Because I was swing as well, so I covered all the male roles as well as Mike Gibbs. You know, the role of Joe Casey, which, as far as stage time is concerned, is I think is the biggest one there is. And so, to a certain extent, doing all of that in what was my first West End show was hell. It's absolute hell because one, I am not cut out to be a swing. Um, the work that swings do, it, you have to be brilliant, and I'm not brilliant as a swing. Literally, any casting directors listening, I've just done myself out of a million jobs. But
I'll
no,
edit it
I
out.
was
I'll edit it out.
yeah, yeah. But covering Mike Gibson and covering the role of Joe Casey was great because I put all my energies into that because that's where the passion lies. But as a swing, I was terrible. And I would I'd go onto a number and into a number and I'd be doing the dance and I'd look across at one of my fellow castmates and they'd be giving me a look of like, what the hell are you doing standing next to me? You're definitely not there. And so I'd move to like another area and carry on the dance and someone else would look at me going, no, and they'd shake their head. And honestly, I was all over the shop. Anyway, in answer to your question, um, doing the role of Joe Casey, it was tough at first because it's a original West End show. Everything continually changed throughout the previews. So, and I was there marking down my stuff for a swing as well. So as I'm marking down this new number and the new plots for the different male cast members, I'd start hearing lines I'd never heard before, and the writers have changed some of the lines for Mike to say, and I'm like, right, got to write that down, and you could never possibly keep up. And then what subsequently happened was, I think it was, I don't know if it was during the previews. My memory has gone a bit with this now, but Mike got a bit poorly, and I knew it was happening. I knew people were starting to talk, and people in the theatre sitting in the seats, and the director was looking around at me, like just kept looking around at me, and I'm thinking, I know what's coming here. And this was like 6 in the evening, and we had a show the next day, and Mike was nowhere to be seen. He'd gone, and the resident director came up to me and said, "Look, Mike's going to take a day off tomorrow. Do you think you can? Do you think you can do the show?" And I said, when? Tomorrow? He said, no, no, tonight. And I was like, I said, look, I went down and sat with the choreographer, Peter Darling, and the director, and we sat there, and they said, what do you think? Do you think you could do it? And I said, look, there are 19 magic tricks. There are, I've never stood on stage with the part. I've never had a run through. I said, if you really want me to do it for the show tonight, I will do it. But I'm telling you now, the show will stop. I had to be, I had to be, I had to be considerate of the fact that every actor wants to be the hero, and oh, this is the moment. But the where you could do really well and get everyone's thanks, but this was not the situation to play the hero when you know that actually, without the rehearsals that we have for the costume changes, a Guinness World Record amount of costume changes, I hadn't rehearsed one. And some of them had to be rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed. It was just obvious the show would have fallen apart. So I said, I will do it if you really want me to, but I think what we should do is rehearse into the night and all day tomorrow. And if Mike's not back by tomorrow, then I'll go on. And that's what we all decided to do as a group. And we rehearsed that night. I went home in a daze, and then came back at the crack the next day, and we just rehearsed everything. And then that evening, I went on, and it was I'll never forget being in the wing and hearing the the um the music start up for the show, and then it's going down, no, 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 and then it goes, and that's your cue to run on. And I'll never forget this heartbeat sound coming on and going, how did I get myself into this? How has this happened? I'm about to go on for this role, and I have no, like, it's going to be fly by the seat of your pants. And I went on, and it was a blur, and I think I only forgot 1 or 2 lines, he says, and managed to get through it, and I'll never forget that day. And then, as I say, I ended up going on for the role so much more for months, and I'll just never forget it, because that role, I knew at the time, I think I'll never play a role like this again in my life, and it's my first ever West End show. But it's, and I just loved it. I loved it, and I am. I look back on it with a certain sense of nostalgia, just because it was a time in my life I couldn't quite believe was happening, and it's gone now. But I'm just pleased I've lived through it. And one more thing, I know I'm
It's
rattling
all right.
on,
Adds
but
out the runtime.
the BBC, yeah, the BBC came in to film it. Probably shouldn't say this, but the BBC came in to film it, and they filmed the matinee, which was me, Friday, or they filmed it on Friday, and then they filmed it on Saturday. So the filming on the Friday was a rehearsal, basically, and obviously they then filmed Mike and the rest of the cast the next day. That went out to DVD. And at the time, my dear late mother was, at the time, she was very ill, with multiple sclerosis, and I always remember this. The company director, God bless her, spoke to the BBC and said, "You know, when you're, filming today, and you're just recording, and you're not pressing the record button, Chris's mum can't watch the show because she's too ill. Would you mind pressing the record button?" And they did. And a couple of weeks later, I got a top secret video of myself, like the DVD of myself playing the part, which has forever remained locked away. But I managed to be able to show it to my late mum, and I'll never forget that. I'll never forget the company manager for doing it. And so I have my own little bit of video of me doing it as well, so for me to keep close to my heart. So a really happy time for me.
Absolutely. That must be one of your best personal highlights from over the years as well. Just
Yeah.
having that memory.
Yeah, I'll just, like I say, I'll never forget it, because it was 2002. I'd only done one other job, and what's happening is special. I found it quite hard to grasp, because 1 minute you're on for Joe Casey, the next minute I was a swing, and I didn't know what I was doing. um, and um, and then the next thing, we knew that we might be getting our notice, because the show just didn't sell, which is crazy. It won the Olivier, and it just, I think it was, personally, I probably think it was marketed slightly wrong. It was sold as a Madness musical, and then we got the Madness fans, and then once they'd come and gone, there wasn't much left. So then they kind of changed it to the London musical, and even the Olivier didn't save it. And it's such a shame, because it is still to this day, I think, one of the best bits of theatre ever made. And I'm not just saying that because I was in it, but I really do. I just think it's so special. So yeah, it is a certain highlight, if not the highlight, which I'll never forget.
Now, one thing that goes hand in hand with theatre film are mishaps. I've got plenty from over the years. Do you have any memorable mishaps?
Well, I'm going to have to remember lots, because I'm doing my own radio show now on something called Moxie Radio. It's called the Chris Thatcher Show, and one of the spin-off shows is going to be a show called it hasn't been titled yet, actually, but it's going to be all about mishaps. So I've had to rack my brain lately. So I definitely have some. So I'm trying to pick the right one. Um, I always remember the one, the one from. Well, there's a few. My first ever job, as I said, was Greece, and there were lots of technical difficulties in Greece, to put it mildly. And each time we moved to a different location, there was subsequent problems. And of course, as the actor, you were like, well, it's not my problem. I'll just go on and hope the show goes all right. And one of them was that in the second half, the burger bar, which is a big bar with lots of stalls, would move forward downstage, down a rake, and it would get halfway downstage and it would stop, and then the lights would come up. And when the lights came up, my character, I don't know how this was allowed to happen, but my character had a free line. So the free line was something like, I would make it up each night, and I could say whatever I wanted, but it had to be along the lines of like, and then the elephant said, "That's not my trunk," and we all laugh, right? That it's that kind of thing, just putting in the end of a joke that people, the audience, can understand. And we started, we mucked about, and we kept putting in jokes in. Shouldn't say this either, never going to work again. But we were putting in jokes in, and saying different things. And I mean, I can't remember the exact things we used to say, but this one time, as we were coming down stage, in darkness, waiting for the lights to come up and then me to say my line. We came down and there was a bit of a judder in the burger bar, and then the lights came up, and I said something along the lines of, and then the elephant said, "That's not my trunk," or whatever it was, right? And then the T-birds around me are supposed to all laugh hysterically, and then we carry on with the scene. So I say this line, and just as I say the line, the burger bar, as it had gone down stage, ran over an electricity cable and shorted the lights out. It shorted everything out. There was a power cut on stage, right? And front of house. The only thing that was left working were the spots. So I went, the elephant said, "That's not my trunk." Blackout, spot on me, not the other T-birds, just literally on my face. And it was the opening night at the Edinburgh Playhouse, right? And I remember saying it, and all the other T-birds going, ha, 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 and just going quiet. And the audience, because they wouldn't get the joke, because the idea was we just carry on, they all kind of went, ha, ha, ha. And then I just sat there with the spotlight on my face in front of 2,000 people, not knowing what to say. And it just kind of sat there, like, and everyone just started, like, the rest of the T-birds just laughing at me. But yeah, that was pretty bad. And we had the same with the with the problem with the with Grease Lightning, the car. That sometimes when they would try and push the car on, it would get caught in the tracks off stage. So every day we get to this scene, and we go, "Hey, it's Kaniki," and then we say, "Hi, Kaniki," and then the car would come on and he'd say these lines, and then we carry on and sing Grease Lightning. And it got to the point where, like, 3 out of 8 shows, the car would get stuck on the track in the wings, and you'd see the crew going, trying to push the car on. It wouldn't go on. And we go, "Come on, Kaniki, put your foot down." God, he's so slow these days, and coming up with these really crap, what's the word I'm looking for? Improvisations. And so the guy playing Kaniki, Sam Hudson, his name was, he was in Brookside. He said to us, "I'll tell you what, if it happens again," I've already told him, "If it happens again, I'm not bothering. I'm just going to get out of the car. I'm going to step over the windows, and I'm going to step onto the bonnet. I'm going to jump onto stage, and I'm just going to carry on the scene. They can deal with it." And we're like, "Okay, Sam, fine, fair enough." So this one day, we say, "Hey, Kaniki," and he's in the car in the wing, and the crew starts struggling again. And they can't get the car on, and you see the fury in his face, and he's like, "Right." So he gets up out of his seat, steps over the window, steps onto the bonnet, and just as he's about to step onto the stage, the car comes free. The car shoots onto stage, and obviously now this is going on the podcast, so there's no video, right? So
Yeah,
I can't
it's
show what's going
video.
on.
It's
But
a video one.
go on.
It's a video one. So
Oh, good. Well, it's a video, right? Great. So he does this, like he does this, like he's almost going over. And as he comes, this is his first entrance as well, and we're dying. Well, we can hardly say anything, but in that split second where he almost loses it, his brain tells him to do something cool because Kaniki is so cool. He's a T-bird, right? So he kind of goes, "Whoa," and then he puts his fist out like Superman as he comes on. And then they expected us to do the rest of the scene, and we're just crying. So yeah, that's one of the highlights of things going wrong. Another one, very very briefly, is like automated problems going on. So we've had this with Starlight Express where I'm playing Rusty, and as I'm coming down the bowl, it was in one of the rehearsals. They had lots of people in. What I mean by a bowl, I mean by a big ramp,
yeah.
which scoops up at the back of the stage. And as I'm zooming down it, the crew inside it, who at the start used to operate it manually, thought they got a go, and they opened the bowl up so it splits. So as I skated down, the floor disappeared from underneath me. And at the last minute, I had to put my toe stock down and jump over the hole, which I only just made, and then slid down on my arse. But yeah, obviously in Starlight Express, you can imagine there's a million different crash stories as
Yeah.
well, and there was certainly a lot of those. So yeah.
So moving on from like mishaps and stuff, you've already touched upon getting into puppetry with Avenue Q. What was your
Mm.
learning process like for how to puppeteer and all that?
Um, It was when we started, I think we had a week's intensive puppetry training with Nigel Plaskett. And I'd never picked it up before. We just started with the very, very basics and worked our way up, knowing that after that week, we would then pick the puppets up for real and block the show. And so that first week, was just mental, just trying to take it all in. And then we went on to block the show, and we're all over the shop as well. And especially when you then go on for the part, you've got so much tension for trying to get everything right that all the tension goes into your arm. And there was one point where, this goes back to the Mishaps, but I did my first entrance as Nikki. No, it was the second one. I was doing the song "If You Were Gay," and I came on, and I'd already got tension in my hand and in my arm from the previous scene. This is one of my first ever kind of performances on in the West End for it, and I came on and I go, "Oh, hi, Rod," and the other guy goes, "Hi, Nikki," and I go, "Oh, hey, Rod, you'll never guess what happened to me on the subway this morning. This guy was laughing at me and smiling at me," and as I said these words, I do suffer from cramp in different places, which is odd, and I got cramp in my fingers, and I can't even demonstrate it now, but they curled up and I couldn't do anything. And I couldn't, usually when you get cramp, you've got to stretch it out. I couldn't take the puppet off on stage and stretch it out. So Nicky just suddenly went into this kind of weird, and with his neck broken. And I had to just kind of just bash it out and try and get out of this. Anyway, I'm digressing into more Mishaps, but
It's all right.
it took a lot of time to for the basic training to slowly get in, and you will get notes every day, every time Nigel was in, and you just try and correct them and correct them and correct them. And even by the time I got to the end of the third cast that I was in at the end of the second tour, so my last stint, Nigel would come in, and every now and again he'd go, "Yeah, not really got any notes for you today. Just watch this, just watch that." But generally, there's always more notes, and there will always be, even for the best puppeteers in the world, you're always going to be getting more notes. There's always things to learn, in my opinion, with puppetry. And I'm far from perfect, far from perfect. Compared to some of the puppeteers I've worked with as well. Like some of them are just in a different universe. But again, I just think it's the continual training and the continual practice that people need, and I certainly need to carry on. As I say, so I then carried that on and then taught myself the screen puppeteering so I could be able to use it in the Muppets. And I suppose this is the point where, if you're talking about the learning of puppetry, where I should mention screen puppeteering and the two disciplines. It sounds awfully boring when I say it like that. But there's something called straight scan and there's something called reverse scan. Does that ring any bells with you, Nathan?
Not off the top of my head.
So if you imagine you're like on Zoom right now, I'm looking in the monitor and I can see myself. And if I look to my left on the monitor, I look to my left like a mirror. That's the same with puppets, where if you look at the monitor that you're doing the work on, if you look left for the puppet will look left as well. And that's called reverse scan, right? But there's also straight scan, which is where if you look left with the puppet on the screen, he'll look right because the camera is showing you exactly what the camera's seeing. And that's called straight scan, which means that you've got to get your mind into this place where if you see on the monitor that your puppet is slightly leaning to the left, in real time, you're leaning slightly to the right. So you've got to alternate it to make it right. And my natural talents go into reverse scan, not straight scan. I really struggle with straight scan, but I've got a lot better since going on the Muppets, because the Muppets and the Dark Crystal with Jim Henson Company, they are straight scan only shoots, and they only use straight scan. And I think that's because originally they didn't have, when the Henson Company started up, they didn't have the ability to flip the camera. So they all learnt that way, and they see that as the kind of the pure way of doing it. And I understand that, but for us, we're like, oh god. Well, for me personally, I'm like, oh god. But I've managed to be able to do. I can do both of them now, really. But I'll always prefer reverse scan, and using a bit of a mirror image, as it were. But it's nice to be able to do both, and it keeps you on your toes anyway.
Because it leads perfectly on to next question. What was it like working on and with the Muppets and on Dark Crystal? Because I'm very jealous of that because I love the Muppets.
Well, I would love to. I'd love to like be that person now that is like, oh yeah, it was okay, but it's the Muppets, and I could not believe it. I was pinching myself, um, because I was always a fan as a kid as well, such a fan, and to suddenly find yourself surrounded by those loved things that you loved as a child, it was just really special. And you, I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to think what I can and can't say about some of the puppets. You're not allowed to have any photos with the puppets, and rightfully so, because it's such a well protected brand that they want to make sure that all they don't want the puppets to be seen without a hand in them, basically. Uh, and I understand why now, because I saw Kermit the Frog without a hand in him, and it literally is a green puddle. It's very odd. They don't have a hand in them. But yeah, so to be suddenly surrounded by these puppets and characters that you grew up watching. I mean, the Muppet movie, the original Muppet movie, is so special to me. I just remember certain things out of it, like that stuck in my mind, like the coloured ice cream that Gonzo would eat, and the huge animal that bust out of the garage, and things like that. And then suddenly they're there in front of you, and they're absolutely exquisite. The puppets as well. Um, so it's hard to answer your question without anything but just a kind of I was just wowed by it. And you had to keep reminding yourself that that's where you were, pinching yourself, and also really pinching myself hard to make sure that the job that I was doing was a good one, because that was the first time I'd really professionally done screen puppeteering, and there it was, and it was the Muppets. So I remember feeling really lucky, because lots of people can work their whole life in puppeteering and think, "Oh, I'd love to do the Muppets one day." And there was me doing it as one of my first ever screen puppeteering jobs. So I felt a lot of responsibility to be good enough, make sure that I didn't muck it up. And there were a few squeaky bum times in the first few scenes where I got to play Beaker in one of the scenes, and Beaker is very long and straight. And someone said to me before we filmed it, they said, "Oh, you got Beaker?" I said, "Yeah, yeah, I can't believe it. I love Beaker." And he said, "Yeah, good luck with that." And I said, "What?" And he said, "Yeah, it's quite difficult, that one." I said, "Why is it difficult?" And he said, "Because it's long and straight. When it's on camera, if you are slightly off, it will really show. Whereas if you have a big fat character, you won't notice if it's slightly angled." And yeah, so that was a real baptism of fire, because in that first scene, I had a few notes in between takes, and people saying, just try and keep him, just try and keep him a little bit straighter. And I'm like in my head going, "Yeah, you go, I'm trying, I'm really trying." But again, yeah, baptism of fire. And I kind of cut my teeth with it there. And I've managed to go on and obviously do Dark Crystal, among other things as well. So yeah, it was a dream. You know what? I'll say this now, as a working actor, nearly every actor, unless you're really, really lucky, you don't work all the time. You have time out of work. And since I decided to get into puppetry, I've really tried to steer myself into that, and I don't really do theatre as much. And so subsequently I haven't done much theatre for a long time. But there's time off quite a lot, and it can play with your mind. Sorry if you're getting dings. That's my wife asking me if I want dinner. Um, there are times when you're out of work, and I don't mind it now, and I think to myself, it's okay. Every actor goes out of work, and I just feel that I'm lucky, because I can look back and go, these are the things that I've done, and you can never take it away. And I'm just proud to have done it. And if I never work again, I can just say I'm proud of what I've done. And what's nice about the films is that your name's forever on the credits as well, which is just amazing.
So moving on, you also provide lessons for people. So is that in puppetry, in acting? What do you provide?
I teach a few things. The main thing I teach is puppetry. So I teach them the basics that I learned, and I really push people as far as characters are concerned as well. So I teach puppetry. I teach acting through song. My wife runs a company called the Actors Class, and I sometimes teach her students puppetry and acting through song. But the main other one, the other discipline that I teach is a commercial masterclass, because over the years I've been lucky enough to film, I don't know, 30 odd commercials in my time, and I never used to get castings for commercials. So I didn't know if I had any chance of doing them. And then I eventually moved with what is still my current agent, which is Wintersons, and they've got a fantastic commercial section. department, and they put me up. They started putting me up for commercials, and I just started getting them, and it ended up being something that just fitted for me. It worked. I don't know why, but I had a passion for it as well. Um, so subsequently, I've done lots of commercials. So now I believe that I've got certain things I believe in that are how you can get those commercials, how you can go about getting those jobs. And I teach intensive commercial classes where I teach them the tips and tricks, but also the exercises, and getting on the feet and doing it, because you learn a lot when you do those castings. You see a lot of, because sometimes with commercial castings you have to do it with someone else, and you see what they do, and if you see if they're being really brilliant at something, or if you see if they're being awful and why. And so now I have my own little kind of way of teaching, and what I believe is how you go about getting commercials. And I've had a few students as well that have kind of started out, and now they're doing all the time. So it's really satisfying. So yeah, so puppetry, acting through song, and commercial masterclasses are my main thing.
Yeah. So, what is your teaching method, especially during puppetry lessons? What are your methods? Do you get them to get a puppet for themselves, and you see how they move the hand?
Uh, I believe you really have to start like I was taught from Nigel, and I don't really tend to steer away from what Nigel taught me, because who am I to try to muck about with that? There are a few things that I do slightly differently because it fits in with me, but I personally start like Nigel did. There's no puppet at the start. There's just your arm and your hand, and getting the right structure from the outset, because you get it right at that point, it makes a difference when you have the puppet on. If you have a position in your arm and in your wrist and in your hand that is slightly off what it should be, once you put that puppet on, that puppet looks very weird. So you have to get it right from the start, and then you build it up. And the way I teach is that, this is my own personal view, is all about layers. Is that there is so many different layers with puppetry. So you start off with the structure, and then your hand shape, and then the utilization of the thumb away from the forefingers, and then into lip sync. And what I mean by that is the puppet talking, and not doing something called chomping, which is to close when you're supposed to open, that kind of thing. So you add that layer on, and then eventually you add eyes, and I add ping pong balls onto the hand with dots on them, so you've got some form of focus. That's the next layer, and we look at focus and being able to look with the puppet's eyes in the direction you want them to look at. And then we add on the extra disciplines, which is walking, and being able to have a conversation, and your body shape as an Avenue Q puppeteer, that you can look certain ways but not other ways without twisting your body in particular ways, which ends up, if you do it in a bad way, you break the puppet's neck. Um, so there, yeah, so I teach the layers, and then as you teach each layer, the original layer that you told them falls off somewhat, because it's like telling you to rub your stomach and pat your head, and then telling you to stick your tongue out as you do it, and then asking you to look left and right with your eyes, and then add your shoulders, and it suddenly becomes a kind of a mush. And so it's that practice that you need to do to make sure that those original things that you learn at the start, like the lip sync, and doesn't fall away when you start adding character, or when you start adding script, or when you add choreography. And there's so much to it that it is, like you say, rubbing your head and patting your stomach or whatever. So yeah, so I make sure that's how I work it up, and that's how I teach the puppetry.
Well, they sound brilliant. I might have to join soon. Get back into puppetry.
Hey, listen, I do personal puppetry classes. I done one today, and I got one tomorrow, so you're all welcome.
So, I just have one last question for you. Um, do
Sure.
you do you have any advice for anyone wanting to get into this industry, be it theatre or puppetry?
I think a general. I'm desperately trying not to be cliched. Like, if you've got a dream, go for it, because obviously I believe in that. Um, I just think that you've in today's world, if you want to do it, you've got to really, really commit to it. As I say, I teach a lot of students, and there have been students who have come and gone over the years, and you know that some of them, they may not have what it takes, um, and mentally they won't go for it. But you've got to be willing to sacrifice a lot of things to go for it, because unfortunately, it's a industry where a lot of other people will do that if you don't. Secondly, is to say that I don't think the ideal scenario that a lot of people or Joe Public think is what people should be aiming for, which is rather than thinking about having a big break or becoming famous, which is an ugly word for me at the moment. It's about being able to work and do the thing that you're passionate about for your life and make it work. And there's no truer time than right now, after the pandemic, of knowing that your options get very, very limited. The commercials stopped, and theatre's not happening, and finding a way to still be creative, which is what essentially a lot of artists want, and make their living. And that's the dream. Oh, that sounds cliched itself, but that's the dream, to be able to, I've just moved into a new house with my wife, and you want to be able to go, okay, this is the mortgage. Can I pay the mortgage without having to go and stack shelves? And but at the same time, you might face that at some point, because that is the way it is. And when I was younger, I mean, I told myself, well, I don't care what happens. I'm just going to go for my dream, and I'm glad I did. But here I am, and there are months in your life where you kind of go, oh wow, what am I going to do for my money? Luckily I run my own wedding singing company called the Tailored Tenors, and so that's my backup. And so when I don't have artistic puppetry or theatre work, I go and sing at weddings with my singing partner. And during the lockdown, we've been doing something called tailored tenograms, which is turning up on people's doorsteps and singing from a COVID safe space and cheering up people that are in isolation who can't see their families. And that's just another kind of, I don't want to say the phrase string to my bow, but you have to have all these different things to make it work. That's the only way now that I've been able to make ends meet, by saying, I've got a little radio show going on. I sing at weddings and events. I do puppetry when the work comes along. I do theatre again if the right show came up. I teach commercial masterclasses. All these things, just to be able to get by. And if you can get by, that's the dream for me. Of course, we'd all like to suddenly get, a job that maybe makes you well known and does stuff for your career. But in the meantime, I mean, I look at my I look at my brother-in-law. His name's James Doherty, and he never stops working. And he's not particularly famous, but I admire him so much, because that's what it's all about. So I think my advice is, be aware that it's going to be difficult. But if you've got a passion for it, that's all you need, and you've got to go for it. And also, when I said to Nigel Plaskett, I want to do more puppetry, I never have dreamed I would be in the Muppets. And you just never know what's around the corner. And that is so relevant for the puppetry thing, because, once I'd done the Muppets, I was like, well, you just hope you get a call one day. And luckily I did get a call about the Dark Crystal to say, would you like to come and audition for it? And so suddenly you're working with Netflix for a while, and then since then it's been quite a few years, and there's been bugger all going on. But you don't know when the next thing's going to come, but you've got to be willing to stick it out and go for it. And then you'll find yourself at those times on stage playing Joe Casey, or in the Muppets playing Pepe the Prawn or Beaker, pinching yourself and going, this is what it's all about. And feeling truly blessed and very lucky.
That is some incredible advice. Chris,
Mm.
thank you so much for
Thanks.
joining me. Where can people find you? Social medias, your radio shows?
So you find me on social media. I'm on Twitter. I'm Chris Thatcher. Crazy name. Instagram, Chris Thatcher _UK. I've got a website as well, which is just my name.co.uk. So you can see my ugly mug on there and some different videos that I've done there. And one of my puppet characters that I do on YouTube with a company called Sloppy, which is for kids, which is good. And then also, if you want to check out any radio shows, I'm now appearing on the Chris Thatcher Show, my own show on Moxie Radio. And you can find that, which is moxieradio.online. It's an online radio station. And that's every Monday at 7 p.m. And there'll be other shows coming up soon, but you'll have to look on the website of Moxie Radio to find out that one. And I think that's it for the social media.
Yep.
Yeah, that's about it. You can,
All
I'm contactable that way.
All the links will be below, so you can find those directly.
Oh,
yes.
can I do this?
Yep,
Can I get to the point below? I've always wanted to do that. Yeah. Click the link. Although you're not, it's not Strictly Come Dancing. You're not voting for me, but yeah.
But Chris, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. And thank you guys.
Pleasure was all mine, Nathan.
And thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Interval Conversations.